All right, I call the September 8th meeting of the school committee to order. We've got some new things going on tonight. We're live with the public Zoom for the first time. For better or worse, there aren't dozens of people joining, so it's probably a good starting point to just have a couple of folks joining. The purpose of tonight's meeting primarily is around the Killam warrant article that will be up for a vote for this committee in our meeting next week. We will go through, have a public comment period for anybody who wants to make a comment for anything that's not on the agenda, so in other words, not related to Killam. We'll do a quick round of reports, although we just met last week, so I know folks may not have a ton to share this evening. And then we'll go into 2 items of business, both related to Killam. The first is our formal public hearing, which was posted at Town Hall as well as in the local press over the last couple of weeks. And then we will also have a brief discussion about a draft introduction that would precede the warrant article in the warrant report. So that's the plan for tonight, and we can jump in. So let me start with, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Marianne, go ahead.
I'd like to call the Renting Advisory Committee to order.
Thank you. No other committees, we're good. Okay. All right, so why don't we start, we'll start with public comment. If there's anybody who would like to talk about anything that's not on the agenda tonight, now would be the opportunity. If you want to talk about Killam, we'll certainly have that opportunity during the hearing. Nope, okay. So why don't we go to reports? Ms. Baton.
No reports this evening.
Dr. Milichewski.
No reports this evening.
Okay. Sarah?
No report.
Aaron?
No report this evening.
Tom?
Well, I guess I'll be the one who's got a report. We had an ARPA, and we're now called to order here as well. We had an ARPA meeting earlier this week on Tuesday. We continued to work through our process of voting for recommendations to the select board. Some of the votes that were made on that night is we voted as a committee to allocate $1.5 million to the Birch Meadow Phase 1 plan, which is a pretty large spend there, but something that's we all know has been outstanding for quite some time. That's for the what they call the main artery, the lacrosse wall, bathroom type area, and whatever, I don't know what that type of area is called.
The pavilion?
The pavilion, thank you. And a new parking lot area that will also help address some of the runoff of the stormwater and whatnot that's currently, or what used to be the Imagination Station area. So that's what that's going to cover. So hopefully that was fully funded by us as far as the request was, so hopefully that will be able to kick off relatively soon. We also voted to, by a vote of 7-1, to allocate $13,500 to the Reading Historical Commission for some stuff so they can redo some maps and take care of some maps. We voted to allocate $22,500 to the Conservation Commission to take care of Bear Meadow and also to put a parking rack for bicycles up at Matera Cabin. We voted $46,200 for the Reading Food Pantry, which would cover 1 year of gift cards for people, $1,600 per month, give or take, as well as 2 additional refrigerators and $15,000 that's necessary for them to search for additional and new space. We also voted $96,100 for the special education students / young adults programming, presumably through the Y, but requested that it be allocated and controlled through Reading Rec as a result of that conversation. And that leaves us with, about 1.9, give or take, left as part of our conversation. And our next meeting is scheduled for October 12th. We also spent quite a bit of time going through hazard pay or premium pay with regards to those employees in the town, various different unions as well as non-union people that worked during the period of time to help potentially support them, which is one of the core foundations of the ARPA money as well. So a lot there, but we still have a few things to solve over the next month or so.
Great, thank you. And Carla?
I have no report, but I'd like to call the Killam Building Committee to order, because we have a quorum.
Pat can do that.
We also have a forum of the permanent building committee, so
Great.
all that needs to order as well.
Okay, thank you. And I have no additional report. Tom, I think, covered those bases quite well. Okay, so that brings us to our hearing. So we will open the public hearing. We'll start with Carla reading the notice.
To the inhabitants of the town of Reading, please take notice that the school committee of the town of Reading will hold a public hearing on September 8th, 2022, at 7:30 PM in the Scatini Memorial Library at Reading Memorial High School, 62 Oakland Road, Reading, Mass. Are also available remotely on Zoom to solicit public input in advance of an anticipated subsequent town meeting vote to authorize funding for a feasibility study to rebuild Killam Elementary School. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with the opportunity to become acquainted with the rationale for replacing the current building, as well as the process through which the town and Reading Public Schools are engaged with the Massachusetts Schools Building Authority, the MSBA, for funding support for this project. A copy of discussion documents regarding this topic will be in the school committee packet on the website at www.readingmass.gov. All interested parties are invited to attend the hearing in person or remotely via Zoom, or may submit their comments in writing or by mail prior to 6 p.m. on September 8th, 2022, to dgschoolcommittee@reading.k12.ma.us, by order of Fidel Maltez, Town Manager.
Thank you, Carla. So I declare the public hearing open. So the way that we'll approach this, we've got a brief presentation and sort of a summary of the longer one that we viewed from GNAP last week. So Dr. Milichewski, Msba, Carla, and I will share that presentation a bit. And then the first thing we'll do is invite any of the other public officials in the room on any of the various committees to share any comments that they might have, and then we'll open it up to the public as well. We'll generally follow the same guidelines as we do for typical public comments, so for members of the public anyway. 3 minutes, identify yourself, your address, that sort of thing. And in this case, obviously, you just want to keep it on the topic of the Killam building and the proposed warrant article. So with that, if we could go ahead to the presentation. Dr. Milichewski, I think you're kicking us off.
Great. All right, good evening, Reading community. Nice to see many here. Nice to see some online as well through the new technology. So tonight, we're going to share a little bit about just a summary of what we shared in last week's meeting, which was the rationale behind why we believe that Killam needs a new building. Also then provide an overview of the MSBA process and timeline, and then also share a little bit about what, the implications of the November town meeting vote and what that would mean for our community. And before we dive in, I just also like to say that and I know our team sees this as a tremendous need in our community, which we'll speak about tonight, but also a tremendous opportunity. I think having the commitment of funding from MSBA and a substantial commitment is a huge potential win for our community. So I think pairing the opportunity through MSBA's funding with the need, we think that this is an incredible opportunity for our community. So I'll speak tonight to open it up with just we think the two drivers behind why Killam needs to be addressed. Last week, Joe Huggins, our Director of Facilities, spoke about the facilities needs at length, and then the Killam Elementary Principal, Sarah Levesque, spoke at length about just the programmatic needs. So I'm going to, in just 2 or 3 minutes, share an overview of what they shared here. And Joe and also Kevin Cabuzzi are online if they have anything they'd like to add to. So if you can follow along on the screen, or also this is in the packet, starting with some of the core facilities issues. This is just a few of them. One, lead in the drinking water, which we know right now our students are drinking out of portable water tanks. Lack of ADA compliance in many areas in the school, including the high-def areas, which if you're not familiar with Killam, are sort of those areas that classrooms are on the outside, and they're kind of sunken in the ground, where they're kind of larger communal spaces. Student staff bathrooms, entrance and exits, and cafeteria stage. For us, this is not just a hypothetical. We know we have students and families who we are not able to support as effectively as we want if we were without making some updates. So we feel this is something that's urgent for us to make sure that we are in full compliance to be able to effectively, support all of our families and all of our students. There's some spaces in Killam that require passing through one classroom or one space to get to another. For example, in the kindergarten wing, there's one classroom that can only be accessed through passing through one other kindergarten classroom. We can imagine the challenges with that just programmatically for students. Limited electrical and data connections. Joe spoke at length about this last time, and just really we're using sort of all of the potential electrical and data connection ports that are possible, and also on really outdated panels. Not a safety concern, but really Joe shared that we just don't have an ability to really, utilize or grow further in that area in the current structure. We do not currently have a fire sprinkler system. There is a need for large-scale door and window replacements. A new building would present the opportunity for increased sight lines, which we think are critical for safety. And then we've talked about near the foundation that there's spaces in the building where there's water infiltration during heavy rain. Many people have shared that that Killam has sort of outlived what we believe it can to effectively support the building. And again, these are some of the core facility issues. We are going to, in late October, early November, invite all town meeting members to come out to see the space. So we're going to have 3 separate times. The town manager, Fidel, and I are working through the times now. It'll be a Saturday opportunity, also Friday afternoon and a Tuesday evening to see the space so we can, these are not just, again, things in people's minds. People actually get to see what we're talking about with some of these spaces. In addition to the facilities issues, we also have concerns with the programmatic needs in the building. Principal Levesque spoke at this at length last meeting. We feel is currently very limited opportunities for small group spacing. Also going back to the high def areas, a lot of our small groups, general education support happens in these high def areas, which we also know can be high traffic areas for students, which poses issues for us to effectively meet the academic needs of our students. Rising EL population and limited space to effectively provide sort of out of classroom supports and services. And again, growing special education needs and growing complexity in some of our special education programming that we don't currently have the space to effectively support in the way that we need to. And then lastly, we know that RISE is going to be a core part of this conversation. We currently have a wait list of 51 students at the time, so we know there is a big need in our community for high-quality pre-K programming, and right now, we don't have the space to be able to effectively meet the community needs. So, in addition to it being an opportunity, we also see it just as a major facility issues and also major programmatic concerns, and this presents us an opportunity to address both of those. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to speak a little bit about the MSBA process and timeline, and then turn it over to Sean and Carla, who are going to speak a little bit about the town meeting vote.
Well, there are 3 phases of the MSBA timeline. The first phase is called preparation or eligibility period. The second is called scope definition, and then the third is called scope monitoring. At this time, we're deep involved that very first banner, Modular 1, which is the eligibility period. We're a little more than halfway through. The components that make up this particular module are initial compliance certification, forming a school building committee, and submitting the educational profile and enrollment questionnaire and projections. There are 2 deliverables remaining. One is the maintenance and capital planning documents that are due at the end of November. And then in November, during town meeting, we'll be requesting local authorization for funding. During phase 2, very briefly, that phase is focused entirely on scope definition, and it's during that time that we hire the OPM designer and we conduct the feasibility study and schematic designs. And phase 3 is focused on construction and project completion. On the next slide, we've laid out for you the number of days that are involved in this entire 3-phase project. The eligibility preparation phase, the phase that we're currently in, consists of 270 days. 12 weeks have elapsed, and we have 28 weeks remaining. The project team, feasibility study, schematic design, and project scope and funding, which make up that second phase, involve 150 days for the OPM and designer, about 300 days related to the eligibility study, almost a year, 75 days for schematic design, and 90 days for project scope and funding. And then lastly, the final phase is construction, which is about 1.5 years. So overall, the maximum number of time involved in this project is 3.5 years. It's likely that we could move along faster for some of these modules than others. So it could ultimately be a little less than 3.5 years.
Great. So Sean and I are going to be talking about the implications of this vote at November town meeting. So the ask is for $2.2 million at town meeting that would fund our feasibility study. So one of the things that this would fund is the hiring of the owner's project manager. So that person is going to be working with the town's best interest in mind on all phases of construction, on all phases of the design portion of the construction at this point in time. It will also include the securing of a designer to develop a specific solution. So we've all heard about schemes A through H, right? So there are 8 schemes out there that were originally presented by GNAP. That was a town-wide, he was looking for a town-wide solution. So out of all of those schemes, there are 2 schemes that are potentially feasible, Scheme A and B. So that has secured for us a site, right? So we're on the Killam site, which takes us to our third bullet, which is advancing our understanding of the needs of that site, right? So what does this $2.2 million help us to achieve? It helps us to have a better understanding of what the site looks like, and that will turn into a better total project cost estimate for us. So that will also include the designer, site testing, so there are geotechnical issues, hazmat issues, site surveys, wetland studies, and traffic studies. It will also include a narrative for our mechanical systems, for plumbing, HVAC, fire suppression, and electrical. So we can't stress enough that this $2.2 million, by funding this properly, will help us later on with a better design and better outcomes.
Karen? Go ahead, Ms. Herrick. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Carla.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom. So a little bit about why this is important. So Carla detailed some of the what, and this is kind of the why as I think about it. The simplest and most straightforward one is that this is a required step for us to move from the eligibility period into that scope definition phase, which was the middle row on the chart that Ms. Baton just shared. It's essentially a show of faith from the town that the town is committed to moving forward with this project if things continue to make sense. The MSBA has limited funding and can only accept so many districts into their program, and so this allows us to move forward or not, and the MSBA to then make a decision on whether or not they want to continue working with Reading. Carla alluded to this, but it's very important that we conduct sort of a full set of analyses during this feasibility study period, because any project costs that arise after we've executed a potential funding agreement with the MSBA are not reimbursable. So if we find after we're 6 months into construction that we need additional stoplights, or we need to reconfigure traffic, or there's some sort of site remediation required that we didn't identify during the feasibility study phase, those costs would not be reimbursable and would be directly borne by the town with no share from the MSBA. So having a full set of analyses in this early phase is quite important from that perspective. It does include some contingencies, so we'll go to the breakdown of the number in a minute, but it does include a number of contingencies just so there's a buffer there. And one of the things that GNAP, our consultant's been clear about, is that the number of 2.2 million certainly doesn't obligate us to spend 2.2 million if that's not what's required to do the right analyses and to get the services and support that we need during this phase. And anything that was authorized by the town, could then roll over into future phases of the project as well. And then the last thing is, most of the 2.2 million we expect would be reimbursable from the MSBA. So when we get to a total project cost that's in that project funding agreement at the end of the scope definition phase, most of what we spend as part of this as part of this feasibility study would be included in that total project cost that would ultimately be deemed reimbursable. Dr. Korm.
When you say reimbursable, that's got a percentage, right? Not total.
Yeah, and I don't want to commit to a particular number. We don't know what that number will be yet. likely in the mid to upper 40s range is, you know, sort of the ballpark that we should anticipate, but that's not definitive at this point. That's part of the project funding agreement that we would get to at the end of that next phase. So this is just a breakdown that GNAP used that was, I'll say it's, you know, it's somewhat illustrative, right? I think they're really starting from sort of what's a bottom line number that other towns have spent on similar feasibility studies. And these are examples of some of the types of costs and sort of directionally what those costs could be for some of these analyses. So the biggest buckets that you see there, the designer fees are certainly a significant bucket. The OPM fee is also a significant bucket. Those are professional services that would be third parties selected through a procurement process in partnership with the MSBA. So we'd have some independence there. And then the majority of the other spend that you see on this page are samples or examples of the types of analyses and testing that we might have to do to ensure that we sort of understand everything we need to understand about the site. And as I alluded to earlier, can make sure that all the costs possible are included in that project funding agreement and thus are reimbursable. There's an estimating contingency in here of 20%, which is, you know, I think a catch-all for the sort of the uncertainty around costs that we've all experienced in any variety of forums over the last couple of years. And the original estimate of $2 million was prepared a little over a year ago. So GNAP has suggested a 10% escalation to that, essentially to account for, again, sort of rising costs that we've seen since this estimate was first prepared. I think that's the last slide. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I want to first open up the floor to any other public officials, any members of our boards or committees that have anything to add. Certainly no obligation to do so. You can approach the mic, give us your name, your affiliation, and then failing that, we'll move on to public comment. Okay. Nobody from the public official bucket. If there are folks on Zoom that would like to participate, if you could raise your hand or send a message to Tom Wise, who's also in the Zoom, we can take you off of mute and give you the opportunity to participate. I'll first open it up to anybody in the crowd. Yeah, Ms. Downing. You know the drill. 3 minutes.
Thank you.
State your name.
Mary Ann Downing, 13 Heather Drive, and also a member of FinCom. So I'll preface my comments with I fully support that we need all the reasons why we need Killam to be replaced. But one of the things I'm confused about is adding the RISE aspect. I was just looking back. The original statement of interest that John Doherty filed did not include Killam. I mean, it did not include RISE. And the superintendent just now mentioned, you know, we need to include RISE, and there's a 51 student waiting list on RISE. So I have a question. Are those 51 students all typical students, or do they shouldn't include any students on IEPs, right?
Correct.
So there are other avenues for typical students to attend pre-K in Reading. That's what's been the case for years. I don't know why we're trying to build and expand pre-K to cover students who have other options. Right now, pre-K is not mandated. I understand that can change in the state, but for students who aren't on IEPs, it's not mandated. So that's the scope of the project I'm struggling with. I mean, RISE, we've never tried to have RISE handle all of the possible pre-K students in Reading in the past. I went back to 2002 with the DESI data, and the average pre-K enrollment, you know, from 2002, and it was lower then. If you average all the data out, it's 84 students. For the last 10 years, it's 99 students. We had a peak enrollment of 115 kids from 2019 to 2020. So now projecting that we're trying to increase the size of RISE to accommodate these kids who are going to other pre-K schools right now by, I think GNAP, you know, was thinking 65 kids. You said we had this waiting list. But are those students not going anywhere? Or are they now in, you know, Montessori or Baptist or the other preschools? I don't think they're still waiting. So just the point of my comment, if you want to include RISE, if you're saying there's this compelling need, because I see 65 more kids, that's like 8 classrooms. That's making, if you want to put that over, and even if you want to put Rise and Killam, now you're saying we want to make Rise that much bigger. I heard the building committee talk about a 3rd story on Killam. Just apart from the feasibility study, you've got to sell that to the town and to town meeting, and your reasons for Killam are compelling and amazing, and nobody in their right mind should vote against that. But I don't see it as compelling for Rise. If you have reasons I don't know about beyond just pure enrollment and trying to accommodate the people in Reading who are seeking other options, you should get those ready too to tell town meeting, because right now this is a significant increase in scope and size of what Killam would be, which means the ultimate building that the taxpayers will be asked to fund is that much bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Was there anybody on the Zoom so far?
Not on the Zoom, but you.
Yes, sir.
And Jay Gallagher, I guess maybe more of a question/comment. So I know a while back there was some talk about shutting down some of the other community schools like Birch Meadow and some of the other schools. And I was kind of wondering what the long-term plan is for the other schools. Because at this point, we'll have 2 brand new, really nice elementary schools and 3 a lot older, kind of substandard elementary schools. How does that affect kind of the other 3 in the system, and what's the plan and vision for maintaining those, upgrading those as well?
So you can go first, or I can go first. You want to take a shot at it? So the MSBA process is specific to a site. So this process that we're embarking on is really just about, the needs at Killam. Now, that project could include impacts to other schools, including, moving students from other schools to relieve crowding in other schools, for instance. But this discussion would not encompass any sort of, rebuilds or renovations or anything like that for any of the other schools. The other thing that I'll say just about the longer term question, so that other nice new school, I think, is almost 20 years old now. So it's still quite nice, I will say. But the other thing about the sort of long-term question that I would add is we can only have one school in the MSBA process at a time. So we're, even if all of this with Killam goes swimmingly and, the town approves it and we move forward and we build a new school, we're, 5, 6, 7 years away from having any discussion about an MSBA process around any of the other schools. So anything that we would want to do in the interim would have to be borne completely by the town from a building cost perspective. So.
No, go ahead.
I'll just add to what Sean said, in that, and Pat, jump in where necessary here as well, is every one of the rest of our schools has been renovated in some way, shape, or form since it was originally built. Killam has not ever. Back since 1967 or whatever the date is that it is, it hasn't been renovated in terms of real renovation. We put up false walls here and there where we could to make things work, but it has never been renovated. Josh Wheaton has, Barrows has, Birch Meadow has. So those have received some funding over the years. I mean, to Sean's point, Woodend is 20 years old already, pretty much. But those renovations happened before that. But Killam hasn't had anything since the 60s.
The only thing I would add to that too is that for us, and the immediate need, obviously, with the 2 things of whether it's the only school with lead in the drinking water and the only school with major, concerns around ADA compliance. I think for us, that's like the first order of business for us. But I think all of our other buildings, I think our facilities team do a really good job of maintaining. I think being in the buildings, they're all in really good condition. So I just see the other schools really that this is just a totally different category of need than the other buildings. And I didn't get to share, to just thank Mary Ann for your comments too around RISE. I think that's a conversation that we look forward to. I know a lot of questions have come in around what's the future of RISE, where should RISE be, what's the best placement. So I think that's something that we think is important to do, not only in terms of merit of where should the program be, what are the implications then for the space here at the high school, but also cost, and what are the impact of cost in different models. So thank you for raising that. Certainly something we'll think through, and hopefully we look forward to engaging the community in that conversation.
And just to clarify, there's no plans to close any of the other schools?
No.
Go ahead.
Can I make,
Please.
if I could make a comment for Mary Ann's question with RISE. When GNAP did the study was done for the town, right? So even though Killam School is going to benefit from this building, it helps out the entire town. It helps out the entire district. So if RISE is going to end up being moved in total to Killam, that helps out the other schools. On one of the slides of the GNAP presentation, they were talking about the other schools being subpar in terms of space. So by having Killam, it is helping out the entire district. So this isn't just a new present for Killam. This is going to help alleviate some of the programmatic needs for the entire district.
My point was that it's taking on a need that's already being fulfilled by private pre-K. Because either way, parents would be paying RISE, paying private, but now we're trying to bring in space for some of the private, and that expands the size of the school and the cost. So the community should decide, is that something we're willing to increase the size of the school by 20% to take on a need that's already being met?
The additional, right? So the additional 50 students. If you're talking about the existing student just coming to the building, right? That's part of the design as well and the need moving forward as well. But if you're talking about additional students coming in, I can see that conversation. Yeah.
That's basically my point.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand if they get RISE and use the high school, then that frees up space in the high school
Right.
for high school students. But it's a question of, now we're expanding a lot, and why stop there? If you're gonna just say 50 more, why not our incoming kindergarten classes, 250 to 300 kids, and they're going to other places, let's put the other pre-Ks out of business and get the money into running public schools. But does the public want to build a school, pay for a school that way?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a couple of things that we should sort of acknowledge. One is the GNAP work really was to inform the pursuit, essentially, was to inform the statement of interest, was to inform, rough ideas of what the total cost might look like and that sort of thing. The schemes that have been proposed by GNAP, it's not like we're just going to build one of those two, right? And so similarly, the specific outcomes in terms of moving students from this school to that school, moving a program from this school to that school, those are TBD during this feasibility study phase, right? We have ideas, I think we have things that we might like to see happen or that we think would benefit the district. The specifics of how many students are moving from where to where and in what programs are still yet to come as part of this feasibility study. And the point's well taken that when it comes time to ask the town for a large chunk of change, if there are, quote unquote, optional things added in that building, we'll have to be able to justify those well. Point's well taken. Thank you. Yes, sir, please.
Matt Holman, 11 Beach Street. My question is a little more logistic, is once this process gets started, the actual construction part, where are the kids going to go that are there now?
So one of the reasons that we've landed on some of the potential plans that we have is that on the Killam site, the intent, the belief is that we could build a building on what's currently the blacktop and some of the field spaces. We build the new building there, the existing building would not have to shut down.
But that was only one of the plans. One of the other plans was building onto Killam, right?
And part of the feasibility study will be figuring out if that's the right answer, if we could accommodate that. Yep,
Okay.
how we would accommodate that, yeah. We don't know yet.
Sorry, and a follow-up on that is, the number you showed, 3.5 years, is that to the completion of the building being built? Or is that to the start of the construction being built?
Completion.
That's completion, including construction.
Okay,
It may be sooner, but
so that will affect my kids.
Okay. Any other, Dr. Corum? While he steps up, go ahead, Erin.
Just going back to the RISE topic, I think it's important to bear in mind how the RISE program works. And part of the reason it's grown is because the need has grown within the town. So correct me if I'm wrong, we have to have 51% typical?
Yeah, correct.
So as we have students, and students get placed at RISE throughout the year, so it's not even that we know all the numbers in September. A student might turn 3 in November, in February, in April, and be eligible to be placed at RISE. So we still have to maintain 51% typical learners to balance that. So it's my understanding part of the reason that RISE has grown is because the demand has grown for the students who need RISE not just the students who want RISE. So I think there has to be a little wiggle room in the program to make sure that we can always meet the need for the kids who must be placed there, if that makes sense.
No, I understand it, I guess if I just look.
Marianne, could you just go to the mic if you're, sorry. Just want to make sure everyone at home can hear both sides of the discussion.
Sorry. So I understand that. It's just when you look at the average, and I left my data there, unless we think the number of kids on IEPs of preschool age is going to double or really increase. I mean, in the past 10 years, we've been hovering around 100 kids in RISE. So that's taking into account whoever's been added that year, and unless we think, it's going to deviate a lot from the average. RISE started smaller. The earlier numbers were like 47 kids, 65 kids total, and if that was the 51-49 ratio, I understand different, the autism spectrum, things have changed in the way they recognize disabilities in young children, but unless we think that population is going to radically increase, we have to accommodate and we need wiggle room, but that's a much bigger chunk of increase. And none of us, I think that came up, I remember Dr. Doxer kind of asked that question, and nobody, when GNAP came in the previous school committee, nobody could really project how many students with disabilities we were going to have. It might have been a context of program size, but I appreciate that. I just don't know that population is going to swing so much such that it would have, 80 of those children and then need, 90 typical kids to make the ratio. And I could be very wrong, but we don't have any way of knowing either way. Thank you. Sorry.
Dr. Corum.
Jeffrey Corum, Ridge Road, also a member of the Finance Committee. In talks of enlarging Killam, I do want to express that I hope that Killam will be enlarged enough that we can remove the modular classrooms that are at other schools that would, like you say, benefit other schools and the students at the other schools as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom.
So I'm just going to build on Aaron's comment and address some of Marianne's comment. Some of you are aware that a few years ago, a law passed decoding dyslexia, requiring early identification of students. There's a forthcoming law that's coming around that as well, a regulation, I should say, to add to that includes child find regulations and requirements that hit the 3 to 4 to 5-year-old level. If and when that hits in place, which it will, because it's going to pass, we can expect that we will start to see more students that qualify in that category hit the RISE levels than historically we've seen. We don't know for sure, but if you look at the statistics around dyslexia, you've got 5 to 17% of your population theoretically that hit that category. That historically has not been a category we've hit too hard at RISE, and that would then fit into this category here, something we have to do. So that's just a point of interest that we've never had to address before. You may have SLP processes that happen for students and things like that, but it hasn't been a child find related to dyslexia historically in that category of 3 to 5-year-olds. That is now going to be a regulation that we're going to have to follow as it comes with decoding dyslexia.
Please.
I also did not interpret Dr. Milichewski's comment about the length of the wait list currently to be a hard number that we would look to increase by. So I'm wary of anyone attaching themselves to the 51 and saying, oh, they want to grow RISE by 51 students. So that's not what we're saying. I think he was trying to emphasize that there is a demand there for it, but just that RISE will continue to be part of the conversation unless we deem, it doesn't make sense to move it. But, I think for now, it would be foolish to talk about addressing town space needs and not talk about our preschool, which is currently, spread out over town because the need is there.
Agreed. Okay. Any other comment from the crowd, or is there anyone on the Zoom? Again, if you raise your hand or chat to Tom Wise, we can see you in the Zoom and take you off mute. Anybody else in the crowd while we wait? Anybody way in the back that has anything to add? No? Okay. All right. Anything else from the committee before we take a motion to close the hearing? Okay, Carla?
We're going to completely close.
We'll close it with the, leaving the written record open.
I move to close the hearing, but leave the record open until 6 PM on September 15th to allow for additional written input on the Killam feasibility study warrant article.
Is there a second?
Second.
I don't believe this is up for discussion, so we'll take a vote. I'll do a roll call because it's a hearing, just to be safe. Sarah?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
And Sean, aye. And the hearing is closed. So what Carla said there about the record being open, we're not going to take a vote on submitting the warrant article for the warrant until our meeting next week. So if anybody, in the crowd, watching at home, anybody who watches this on YouTube, has any additional thoughts they want to share, send those to the school committee at reading.k12.ma.us. Send those to us before 6 PM a week from today, and all of us will see them and incorporate those into our decision-making as we consider the warrant article. Okay. So the last order of business, we'll just really spend a few minutes on. I just wanted to give an orientation to this so that folks can, read it in the interim and come prepared next week to discuss. Those of you who are familiar with our warrant reports know that each warrant article is accompanied by a background blurb. Sometimes it's as simple as this is required by MGL, whatever, to do annually. Sometimes it actually sort of describes, why folks are being asked to vote on what they're being asked to vote on. So I've drafted something here, which is in the packet. We won't go through it in any detail now. But I'll sort of outline it for you. And then I would just ask folks to make sure they take the opportunity to think about it and read it between now and next week. We can take amendments on the floor. We can edit it as necessary. And then this will be something we vote along with the warrant article itself. If we vote to submit the warrant article, we'll also vote the background for the warrant article. So just the quick outline here is I highlighted many of the same facilities challenges that Dr. Milichewski highlighted and Joe highlighted last week. The next paragraph gets into some of the programmatic challenges in the building. We do talk here about, or I do talk about in this draft at least, it's a possible outcome of the project that this could be addressed through a renovation project versus a full rebuild. One of the things that I think came up in the discussion last week that is important for town meeting members to know is this threshold of about 20% of the building's assessed value that would trigger all kinds of different requirements. So if we were to, improve some areas of accessibility, or we were to do plumbing work, or we were to do windows and doors, or, major reconfigurations of the space, once those hit a certain threshold, it triggers all kinds of compliance requirements that today are essentially grandfathered in and would skyrocket sort of the cost of the renovations. Full ADA compliance, for instance, full fire compliance, for instance. So it's certainly a possible outcome of this program of engaging with the MSBA that we end up with a renovation project. I think our guidance from GNAP and based on our discussions has been it's far more likely in our case that a rebuild is going to be the preferable outcome, the more likely outcome. And then I just outline again much of what we heard tonight about the MSBA, the phase that we're in, what this does for us in terms of allowing us into the eligibility period, allowing us into the scope definition period. And then we close by just highlighting that this is actually an explicit requirement of us moving forward is the community authorization requirement, which has to come either in the form of a town meeting vote or a ballot item vote. And given the scale of this at about $2 million, $2.2 million, we are, I think, next week going to opt to submit it to town meeting rather than a ballot initiative. So that's what's outlined in the introduction here. I'll ask the members of the committee again just to take a look at it between now and next week because we will want to vote this next week. So, any additional comments, questions, discussion, anything we missed this evening?
Can I just, on this real
Please,
quick?
yeah.
So Sean, I think you did a great job summarizing, where we are and what's there. A couple of, maybe minor suggestions, especially since I'm sure this will come up on the floor, would be to include the MSBA charts of, 1, 2, and 3 phases.
That's good.
And also to say, while we were notified of invitation in March, we didn't actually start the process until June 1st, because that impacts the 270 days. So if somebody starts to calculate, where are we and all that kind of fun stuff, we're very clear that that didn't start until June 1st, and gives us a little bit of flexibility in time where we stand. So those are the two immediate things I see as I look at it.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay, then I will entertain a final motion. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, do any of our other boards and committees want to adjourn before we do so? Marianne?
And Reading, our advisory committee is, I move to adjourn.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Chris?
Okay, and PBC?
Second. Aye.
Okay. Do we need to do the Killam School Building Committee as well? Do you all have a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
Yeah.
You called it, so.
I move to adjourn the Killam School Building Committee.
Well,
Yeah, We'll just let them finish.
them vote, let them-
Ms. Herrick, if you don't mind.
Yep, so Pat? Sarah? Aye. Karen? John? Greg?
Aye. And you?
And Carla?
Aye.
Okay. Select Board? Okay, and we did not,
Finance Committee.
did we get to FinCom as well? No, we didn't get to quorum.
No issues from FinCom.
All right. Did we set a record for parallel meetings, though? I mean, that felt like a lot. Okay, are there any school committee motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Seconded by Sarah. All in favor? All opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.